Welcome to the Writing Corner with Authors Alcove. I am your host, Agnes Wolf, and today I have JJ Arcanian. He is the founder of a business consultant firm in Michigan, so he's from my home state. He is also an accomplished artisan and has recently ventured into the world of literary fiction with his debut novel, Three Illusions, a Novel. Today we'll be diving into his journey from technical writing to fiction, his protagonist, Dylan Maxwell, and the underlying themes in his novel. So thank you for joining us, JJ.
Thank you very much. Pleased
So
to be
I,
with you.
oh, definitely. So I'd love to know just a little bit more about what inspired you to transition from your career in consulting to the writing world.
Well, I've continued in my consulting business. However, um, technical writing is very dry, very boring, if you will. And I've always had this concept of three illusions in my head. And I played it through for many years. And during COVID is when I finally found the incentive, if you will, to write it. And I wrote it over a long period of time. It was over three, almost 4 years that I wrote the book. I'm obsessive when it comes to having things the way I want them. So I wrote and rewrote it many times over. Um, Part of the impetus was actually Siddhartha, Hermann Hesse's, well-known book from many years ago. He wrote it in 1922. But the protagonist stuck with me over the years, and I tried to envision what a modern day Siddhartha would look like, or even if such a person could exist. And I came to the conclusion that it would be very difficult because we're surrounded by AI, social media, misinformation, and a lot of distractions, let's put it that way. So the protagonist is very much geared to somebody who is very sentient, very forward thinking, and pays attention. And his pet peeve, as a matter of fact, um, is people who do not pay attention. And we have a lot of those people in this world right now. So that was the incentive behind writing Three Illusions. And I took my time and let the book basically develop. Yes, I did outlines. Yes, I did planning. But for the most part, it took a lot of left and right turns.
So,
Mostly left.
so was there a moment that really sparked the idea for this a specific event or idea that sparked the creation of Dylan Maxwell's story?
Um, I don't know if there was a particular moment. I started writing and realized that I could take it somewhere that may be important, if only to me. And I continued on that path. And it took me a while before I even attempted to get any feedback from others, from friends of mine. For instance, I had a peer group that I said, okay, you mind reading some of what I wrote and tell me if I'm wasting my time or if I should continue. And so I guess you would call that a beta test market, but it was a very loosely formed beta test market at first, I admit. But it served as an incentive because I did get a lot of positive feedback and was suggested that I continue and did. And it's a very arduous task, as you probably know. It's very difficult. I thought writing would be much easier because I do it for a living to a large extent. Only the stuff I write about is, like I said, very dry, very boring, and about subjects that I'm very familiar with. I'm up to speed with my variety of consulting.
So one of the marks about Dylan Maxwell is that he has a unique ability to see what others cannot.
Yeah.
How did you develop his character?
Slowly. No, basically, I gave him some qualities that maybe they were enviable qualities that I saw sporadically in others. Maybe I wish that I had some of those qualities, but mostly I just said, okay, if I were to build a person, if I were to create somebody who had characteristics that I would admire, what would they be? And that's where I came up with a lot of my, somebody who paid attention, wasn't self-centered, wasn't focused on himself, was not distracted easily, could extract information accurately the way it was happening, and actually had a little insight into what somebody's underlying intent was, which is pretty important in my estimation.
So so do you mind just giving a basic plot line of what the story is about without giving too many spoilers?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but absolutely. Basically, he's a young man that starts off where the initial scenes show him, introduce him with his mother, and the storyline jumps from Queens, New York, to Ardmore, Pennsylvania, which is a Philadelphia suburb, to the Grand Rapids slash Saugatuck area. Actually, there are scenes that develop in Saugatuck. And he was a University of Michigan student eventually. But before that, you will see that Dylan has these unique qualities that his mother perceives as perspicacity, if you will. He was very insightful. He had qualities that other kids, high school students, and just outside high school didn't possess. And those develop, and I don't want to give away certain parts of the storyline, but um, it becomes a love interest. He falls in love with a client from Grand Rapids, as a matter of fact. And he's in the real estate and development business ultimately in Queens, New York. Um, he also, I will give this away because it's revealed fairly early in the book, writes a column for a college buddy that is a freebie favor. He's not getting paid to do it. His buddy's starting an upstart online publication called Lefty, which the name should imply a little bit of the political leanings there. So he writes a couple of columns for him for free, starting off with columns about the environment, which aren't really revealed in the book. It just says he writes them, and he's very painstaking about his um, investigation and background information. Anything worth doing is worth doing right in Dylan's estimation. And he was taught that by his father, who was a retired military colonel who is also an ophthalmologist. So again, I don't want to give too much away. Dylan writes these voluntary or articles for his buddy, and they cause a stir. And that's revealed on the back cover of the book. So I'm not really giving away too much more than that. The back cover of the book gives away a little bit, just enough to entice the reader to say, okay, has some other underlying themes, because his writing elicits a bombing in New York, a armed protest in Michigan, and also he is solicited by the Democratic Party in Queens to run for political office. That's as much as I say on the back cover, and that's probably as much as I should say in this conversation. I'd rather people discover it, but I will say that Dylan has a lot of pearls of wisdom that he quotes from a variety of philosophical interests. Everybody from Martin Luther King to George Santayana to Mark Twain to John Stuart Mill to Plato to Socrates to Marx, for that matter. And he is very timely in the way he presents these little pearls of wisdom. It comes out during the storyline, let me put it like that. One of his articles is called Plato the Dialectician. And it's short and sweet, but it basically starts off with that. Plato said something to the effect that opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance. And he takes that and expands upon it in his article, trying to reason with people. And he
So does
does a
this
pretty
book
good,
oh, I'm sorry.
and he does a pretty good job of it.
So does this book have any environmental teachings as far as one of the themes?
Inadvertent tidbits. He has like the coffee rolls at his office in Queens where they don't use plastic pods for their Keurig. He's very adamant about it. You either make a pot of coffee or you use compostable pods or you use the spoon into pod variety, if you get my drift. And he even creates what's called the house rules for making coffee. And they're in writing, and he's very steadfast about it. So, yes, there are little bits in there about the environment. Absolutely.
What other themes do you cover in the book?
Basically, the main some of the main things that he talks about is people's failure to pay attention and how that contributes to the divisive nature of the political climate that's out there right now. And how if people are going to have an opinion, they ought to found it on information and not just gut feelings or gut reactions. And he also touches on something that is called basically there's a psychological term, and let me think here for just a minute. Sometimes I lose my train of thought. Where we tune into news stations that feed our existing beliefs. And it's a bias. It's a bias of how we feel and how we view the world. And he addresses that very clearly. He says it'd be much better for everybody if we were to consider all angles and consider other opinions before we draw our conclusions.
The funny thing, like speaking politically, because I tend to have friends who have different political leanings than I do.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about that is that we actually agree with way more than we disagree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
But people won't
fortunately,
get that. They don't see that.
fortunately, I have friends who we can actually have conversations.
That's
Because there
good.
are some people you cannot have conversations politically about. You can't bring anything political up, otherwise they get too heated. Whereas we can just like casually talk and be like, "Oh yeah, I agree with that. Oh yeah, I disagree with that." And like we just share. And I think that that's how we need to be as a culture in order to be able to come with any to really understand what we actually believe and to actually be able to solve problems in our country.
Absolutely. And by the way, the term that I was struggling to remember was is confirmation bias.
Oh yeah.
It's where you tune into a certain station because they speak what you already believe. Um, Dialectics is another thing that is covered in Dylan's articles, where dialectics is a problem-solving methodology that has some very ancient origins with Socrates and Plato and others. And dialectics is basically when you have two people who have differing opinions, but each have the shared understanding that they are trying to arrive at the truth and they're not fearful of how they go about it. They just want to get to the truth. So it's kind of like having two opposing arguments trying to meet together in the center. And that, in his estimation, is part of the problem, is that politically speaking, the center is now missing. The center has gone by the wayside. It's either an extreme one way or an extreme another way, to some extent at least.
That's what me and my husband have talked about, and like even some of me and my friends have talked about how there is no center, and like it's not like that everything is either A or B. There's like C, D, E, F, G. There's a whole alphabet of possible solutions, but we get stuck on A and B, or more like A and Z, I should say.
Yes,
But
because we
one thing
get
that you
stuck
had,
on sound bites.
yeah, you had actually said something before we had started recording about AI, and that's one thing, like, because they use AI to figure out what we want to watch. And that kind of feeds into that confirmation bias. So, like, if you're on TikTok, all of a sudden, if you're liberal or conservative, whichever ones that you spend more time watching are the ones that they're going to send you more of. And so
That's correct.
you never see the opposite of what you tend to believe.
It's all about algorithms.
Yep.
And it goes right down to YouTube for that matter. I mean,
Yes.
it will say, okay, this is what they keep looking at, and so this is what we'll keep feeding them.
I
And
try to I try to purposely slide by because I used to watch some of them, and then I noticed that all I was getting was one side, and so now I purposely just like if it's political or if it's highly charged, I try to just go right because I don't want the algorithms to think that I want to see more of the same thing.
That's correct. Be very specific in what you look for. But there's quite a bit of dialogue, and he has two articles that are in the book. Two in the middle, towards the front of the middle, and also one to end. And both articles address that very issue in his light. And he gives quite a bit of interesting detail in my estimation.
So this is your first published novel. What
Mhm.
was your experience like with the editing and publication process? Was there anything that surprised you?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of things that surprised me, but I did not. I'm fortunate enough to have enough resources where, first of all, I had a lot of background with regard to editing, and I'm very painstaking when it comes to being very tight with regard to grammar, punctuation, etc. And I'm probably a little old-fashioned in many respects too. I know there's a lot more free-form type of writing that goes on in this world that maybe I use, but that's by choice. I also had my manuscript professionally proofread, and that was worth the money spent. Absolutely. And it's only as good as the proofreading organization that you had. And I use a company out of Iowa. I think they're affiliated with the Iowa Writers Group called Proofreading Pal. And they were quite good. And so, I would highly tout them. They were quite good. They came back with, not so much recommendations as just minor edits here and there that I missed. So
So
I was fortunate to have that.
that's awesome. So you self-published.
Yes.
Did you know from the get-go that you were going to self-publish, or was that something that you decided along the way?
It was something I picked up on fairly quickly. Unless you have a pedigree that gives you the opportunity to get in with some of the bigger publishing companies, it's almost a foregone conclusion that that's what you're going to end up doing. So rather than spend a lot of time and get very discouraged by submitting it to a lot of different agents, for instance, I submitted a couple of them, and that was it. I said, no, I'm not going to do this. I said, it's not worth my energy. So just self-publish it and see what happens. But I also contacted proofreading or the Sharon Bialy at I'm trying to think of the name of our organization, Book Savvy, for some assistance with regard to promoting the book, and that's how I came into contact with you. So I mean, it was a learning curve to an extent, but I am also fortunate enough to have enough resources where I could do what I have done so far. And it's still early in the game. I anticipate I will do more. I will get together my website. I've just been very busy of late and haven't got it done yet, but I will. I'll put my website together and I'll promote it as much as I can. But from my understanding, it takes at least a year before you start getting a feel for whether or not it's being well received or not.
So,
Just to get the algorithm on recognized through Amazon and Google. Let's put it that way. The algorithm has everything to do with it. Does Google recognize you or not? When somebody pulls up Three Illusions, are they getting the other guy's book first and foremost or only? That's my next hurdle that I have to deal with.
so do you plan on this being a standalone novel or is it going to be a series?
I have started on another piece. Yeah, because Dylan Maxwell, I didn't kill him off in the book. So he's still out there and we need to see him develop. I left the book wide open on purpose. He and his girlfriend are deliberating whether to conduct business exclusively from Queens or maybe from Petoskey or Traverse City. They haven't decided yet. I left that hanging on purpose.
Good. Well, thank you so much for being part of my podcast, JJ. Before you go, I do want to ask you a variation of the question I ask everybody. And what is one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring author who hasn't yet been published?
Persistence. Don't get discouraged. If you believe in your work, then and keep it up. Because people aren't going to keep, nudging you along. They don't know about it. It's a very private endeavor. When you write, it is a very lonely road to be on, I assure you. Unless you have a big beta test group, which most people will not or do not, it's something you're going to have to get through on your own, and you have to believe in what you're doing. That to me is key.
Thank you again so much, JJ, for being part of my show. I truly appreciate everybody who's on. I also want to thank my listeners. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to rate it. This helps the podcast reach more listeners and also allows books like JJ's Three Illusions, a novel, to get in front of more readers. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also like my conversation with A.E. Faulkner. She is the author of the Nature's Fury series, which also has an environmental theme. Once again, I had the privilege of speaking with JJ Arcanian, author of Three Illusions. He's from my home state, Michigan, and you can find more about JJ and his work at Amazon. And you're working on a website, right?
Yes.
It hasn't yet been up yet, though.
Right.
Again, thank you so much, JJ.
Thank you. And tell your listeners, please, to make sure they include JJ Arcanian when they do a search on Amazon. Otherwise, you get another book called Three Illusions.
I
Thank you
actually
very
got
much.
it up right away.
Oh,
So when I
good.
read Three Illusions, it was one, I don't know if it was the top one, but it was definitely on there. So
Excellent. Thank you very much. Got a bow tie on it. That's the key thing. I appreciate it, Agnes. Nice to speak with you.
no problem.
Have a great day.